Folks, this is David Hurley of EasyChessTips.com, your pub chess bluffer, reporting on the latest game I played against my regular chess partner, Dr. Kazuo Mogami, on the 25th of September 2019. It was the first game of chess I have played since the previous weekend's Open Chess Tournament here in Hiroshima, where I had played 7 games and picked up 3 points, and had used that tournament as an opportunity to practice a new opening repertoire for black, which I have not in any way mastered at all. And I thought I would press on with that new opening repertoire that I'm working with in this game against my regular opponent. So Dr. M opens with E4 and I reply with D6. We then find the moves D4, E5, knight to F3, knight to F6, and we are in the Nimzovich variation of the Philidor Defence. We then get the knight to C3, and when the knight hops out to C3, as you can see, Lichess is recommending that E takes D4, which is indeed what I did, and the response is the knight then takes D4, and we have the 3 knights all on this diagonal here. This is a perfectly standard setup at this stage in the Philidor Defence. There is then this little but significant move of bishop to E7, and then my opponent brought his bishop out to C4, which is perfectly fine. We both castle, and now there is the beginning. After I've made my little C6 move, there is the first error by my opponent, which is a loss of tempo. He moves his bishop back to B3, and I then move my knight to A6, aiming to bring my knight down here to C7. And my opponent moves A3. I make that C7 move, and then my opponent moves his bishop again, and it comes back now to A2. So this was really a loss of tempo, because the move could have happened. It could have happened in 2 moves, not 3. The bishop to C4, then A3, then bishop to A2. So with this loss of tempo, there's no significant loss of advantage, but as white, you start with the initiative, and so if you can keep up the tempo, you can build a strong position. That loss of tempo gives me an entree into the game, as it were, and this is how things develop from here. Now we come to we are approaching the first major blunder of the game. I advance my B pawn. Now this is where things unravel for Dr. M. He moves his knight over to E2, perhaps looking to come over to G3, but he has forgotten. It's rather an elementary mistake. It's something we all do every now and then. That knight was doing an important job of defending this E pawn. The knight is the only defender of the important E pawn, and in moving his knight over, you can see the advantage is completely lost, and it's easy now for me to simply grab that important central pawn. And so all the work of the opening has gone to pot for white, and it puts black in a nice strong position as we emerge from the opening of this game. However, the game continued for quite some time after this. It's an important loss, but it's not yet fatal. I move my knight back. I feel I've got time. I've hopped up, grabbed the pawn. I'll hop my knight back as the queen, in response to the queen's attack. We then get, now here is where another weak series of moves comes in. So I think it's a good place to put the bishop on this diagonal here. It's an open diagonal. It's a great place for that bishop, the B2 bishop, or the bishop on B2. My response is to begin advancing my pawns on the queen's side, and my opponent, seeing the advance of the pawns, I suppose, or seeing the advance of my c pawn, counters by advancing his c pawn. But the effect of that is to immediately negate the great benefit of having your bishop on b2. That great line we just saw has now been erased or blocked by this move, and I can keep it blocked, and I'm very happy to do so. Although Lichess is not recommending this move, to me it was a pretty obvious move to make. I've now blocked both the bishop's diagonals. They were a few moments ago on two open diagonals. There they are. And my opponent closed one of those diagonals, and so I closed the other. And so it's like shutting the double doors to these bishops. They're now quietly sat in the corner. They have to reroute in order to get their way back into the game. The game continued like so. And these moves also, in advancing my pawns on the queen side, gives me b7. And so my bishop is now on a nice open diagonal. It's almost as if the diagonals have swapped over. So the diagonals coming down from a1 to h8 and a2 to g8 have been closed off, opening up the a8 to h1 diagonal. The queen advances right down here into the heart of black's side of the board, and I bring now my queen. See, I'm looking at these two diagonals, so I've put my queen on this diagonal, pointing right at the king. So my two pieces are on open diagonals. The queen, not yet. So now Dr. M finds a good open diagonal for his bishop. He reroutes the bishop. I move my king over, and he brings his bishop in to attack the queen. The queen moves over, and he builds up an attack on my king side like so. Let's just move. Now, so I think, although was Lichess recommending this move, we have the queen to h3. No, Lichess wasn't recommending the move. Lichess recommended queen to h3. It's a strong attack on the king down here. My opponent would love to be able to bring his knight down here to g5 to attack and threaten checkmate, but g5 is strongly defended by my bishop and my knight. Perhaps bringing his knight down here to attack the queen to encourage my one knight to move away, perhaps. But my opponent didn't do that. He moved his knight to g3, and I felt this was a weakness because the queen is becoming boxed in. So the first thing I did was not a queen move, but a bishop move. I moved my bishop over for a veiled attack on the queen. So the knight comes down, looking for this attack on the king, moving my pawn out of the way. The bishop comes in. My opponent is really aiming all his might on this h7 pawn. The knight is still defending it. What else can he throw into the mix? He brings his other bishop down, perhaps hoping that I'm going to swap off a bishop for a knight, which will then enable this knight to come down, and then you get the threat intensifying on that square. Now, I thought about this for a while, and I realized I think I can take, and I think it works in my favor because I have enough defense here. My king and my knight are still defending this h pawn. The attack continues. The more I swap off, the better I feel. So I attempt to shore up my defenses down here. Now, although white is in attacking mode, you can see that the advantage is totally on black's side here. White is still continuing to attack. I move my knight in, the final piece, to push the queen out. I then continue swapping off. And what happens next? We have this continuing attempt to find a way through to my king, even though the advantage is all on my side. And so now, at this stage, the game comes to an end because Dr. M ran out of time. So I won this game on a time a time-based victory. But you can see that the advantage on my side is very high. It's just a matter of waiting for my strike. I've got plenty of time. Well, there wasn't much time on the clock, but the advantage is all with me here. So my first game after the Open Chess Tournament with black saw a nice little victory for the Philidor Defence, opening with d6 against whatever black throws at you. Well, the Philidor Defence is against e4, e4, d6, d4. So there we are. That is how things played out in my first game after the Open Chess Tournament here in Hiroshima in September 2019.